I finally got to see Firestarter yesterday, and that was something. For those of you that may not know, Firestarter is an adaptation from the 1980s horror novel created by the well-renowned Stephen King. If you don't remember his name, he's the author that created most of your heebie-jeebie fever dreams like It, Pet Sematary, and of course, Firestarter. The thing with making Stephen King adaptations is that they don't usually end up doing well. The best and most prominent movie adaptation of Stephen King's novels is, of course, The Shining. You know, the movie with the amazing taglines like "Here's Johnny, the elevator," and "Hello, Johnny.
Here's Johnny."
Even with that film, which became a horror cult classic, Stephen King hated that adaptation. They even made fun of that reality in the movie Ready Player One, which was directed by Steven Spielberg. And all of that information leads us to this one, Firestarter. Believe it or not, this is the second attempt at adapting this book. The first one happened in 1984 with Drew Barrymore as the lead. The story focuses on a little girl named Charlie that realizes that she's got superpowers. Of course, as the movie's title lets you know, she can basically become Prince Zuko and control fire. They don't really explain it in either of the films, but essentially it looks like those heat waves that you kind of see at the edge of the road when you're driving on a long road trip. The air around you starts to get heavy, things start to bubble up, and then boom, spontaneous combustion. Pero papi, don't you fret, because she can also shoot fire from her hands like she's Pyro, or I know, Johnny Storm. The 1984 adaptation was not perfect. It was tropey, at some instances cringy. It followed the 80s style of horror formula. So when I read that they were doing an adaptation in 2022, I was really ecstatic. You had Ryan Kiera Armstrong playing an older version of Charlie, which led me to think this was gonna be a good idea. We had already seen her in It Chapter 2 and American Horror Story, so that's a pretty good track record. You had Sydney Lemon playing her mother, which she's a horror movie veteran. And then, of course, the big draw, which was Zac Efron playing her dad. For those of you that also love That 70s Show, this one also gives you a little bit of fun because Kurtwood Smith is in this too. And the thing is, a lot of people don't know that he's played more iconic roles than just Red in That 70s Show. If you remember correctly, he was the main villain in the RoboCop movie, like the first one. He's also been in Hitchcock and Amityville: The Awakening. So the cast was there and the premise was there because the 1980 book was actually a bestseller. But the movie itself, in this case, is kind of rough and a total disappointment. Essentially, Charlie McGee is the product of science experiments done on her parents by the government by an elusive, mysterious organization named DSI. Both of her parents ended up getting telepathic and telekinetic abilities that are passed down onto her by, obviously, evolution. And that was one of the cleanest explanations that we got in the entire movie because we got a pretty good VHS-style montage of her parents in her college years when they were getting interviewed in order to be a part of these experiments. Of course, when it comes to horror movies, you never trust the government because they turned both of them into lab rats. And through the experimentation, the parents decided to not use their powers after they escaped from the organization. So as she grows from being a young child to a young lady, Charlie has to bottle up and hide her powers, which is not a great idea when you're trying to overcome all of the hormonal changes that happen during middle school. As soon as she starts getting teased and bullied by the other people at her school, her powers pop up like that. And the way that the powers are represented in the movie are actually pretty good because the CGI was absolutely pristine. There's actual good horror tension whenever you see her trying to lose control and the fire starts spewing all over the place. The main issue lies that the film doesn't have a really cohesive vision. The plot stumbles along from one issue to the next of them trying to move from place to place to try to hide Charlie from the government. And then of course you have the government hiring another metahuman as a bounty hunter to try to get her into the lab. That is my major gripe with this film. It tries to be a horror film mixed with Jason Bourne and it just doesn't mesh. Even the 1984 version offered a pretty compelling story with Drew Barrymore excelling as the lead as a young lady. And it kind of sucks that the best part about this movie is the score, but it is absolutely beautiful. Just like the original, it was composed by John Carpenter, who you may know as being the creator of some of the most iconic horror soundtracks of all time. The one that you will recognize instantly is this one. Editor, please roll the clip. Yes, sir. You got the creator of the most iconic horror theme song known to man going on your movie, and it still falls flat. So yes, the sound design was good, and then Zac Efron's performance as a dad, which he's doing now, is pretty compelling as well. He's been hiding his powers as well ever since he left the laboratory, and when he uses them, it ends up damaging him physically. And those father-daughter moments where he's trying to teach Charlie how to cope with what's happening to her body, both as a person and as a superhuman, is actually pretty cool. But Zac Efron is not enough to send this movie across the finish line. Keep in mind, Charlie is meant to be more powerful than all three of her family members combined because Charlie inherited all three of the powers. Because of course, spoiler alert, Charlie has three separate sets of powers. Thanks to the experimentation, she is telekinetic, telepathic, and also a pyromancer. So DSI really has a gem in this superhuman. The other thing that doesn't really make sense is that this movie doesn't really toe the line in terms of when is sending people to the Shadow Realm good and when is it bad. Because Because of course, when you're playing with fire, people end up getting hurt. Whenever you see Charlie going out of control and accidentally, for example, killing someone, you don't know if what she's doing is morally okay or not, at least on her eyes. We know it's bad, but then we're trying to rationalize it from her point of view. And from this movie's perspective, it's just a hazard, collateral damage, if you will. The dialogue is clunky and the story itself doesn't lend itself to much depth. Another instance where this movie could have done better is obviously expanding more on the superpowered assassin known as Rain Man, whose story is really compelling since he's a Native American assassin who ends up getting experimented on by DSI and ends up coming back to help them when he basically has no choice. He is portrayed by Michael Greyeyes and he does an amazing job at being super menacing and controlling of the situation. But again, script-wise, he's not given much to work with. As you can probably tell by now, every time that we take one step forward, we take two steps back. So overall, I would say if you're looking for something innocuous and you have to turn your brain off to enjoy, this can be worth the money, but honestly, it just falls flat. The soundtrack and the sound design and the CGI are great. So visually, you're gonna have a pretty entertaining ride. But if you're expecting a solid story with complex characters and a lot of emotion, you're better off just watching another thing. You could just rewatch The Shining, It, or It 2, and it'll give you the same fix. I am disappointed, but I am hopeful for the future. And speaking of the future, I wanted to let you know that I have started a new challenge here on YouTube. As you know, this is my main channel where I cover everything pop culture, whether it be TV, movies, anime, and everything in between. But I have decided to start diversifying. So I have decided to create a second channel called Tropical Joe Gaming. That is where everything gaming related will fall in terms of my content. Whether it be news, gameplay, reviews, or anything related to pop culture surrounding gaming, that will live over there. And if you're wondering what about the streams, well, Papa, just hold on because I also have a third channel now. That one is called Tropical Joe VODs. So what will happen is that I'm going to be streaming my video game playthroughs on my main channel called Tropical Joe and then delisting them from my channel to put them on Tropical Joe VODs. That way you can see the edited clips with a lot of commentary on Tropical Joe Gaming and enjoy the full breadth and scope of the entire playthrough on Tropical Joe VOD. It's a little experiment that I'm trying to give you all the best experience possible when engaging with my content. So I am leaving it to my amazing editor to show you a little preview of how you can get there, how you can subscribe, and again, thank you so much for supporting the entire journey. Gracias for giving me the opportunity to be your pop culture guy, and of course, make sure to like, share this video with your friends, and of course, subscribe with those notification bells on so you can get instant notifications for whenever I post a video or whenever I go live. Also, if you want to support the channel even further, we also have YouTube memberships. Essentially, those function as tiered subscriptions that you can purchase to have perks on my channel. Whether it be early previews to videos, chatting with me, all of that is going to be explained in the subscriptions area. If you're interested, of course, it's not mandatory, but you can check that out and choose the one that most fits your budget. The proceeds from those subscriptions go directly into me trying to get a new camera because right now I'm recording on my phone. Okay, that was a mouthful, but of course, the movie is exactly what you expect. A 5 or maybe a 6 out of 10 if you're counting the score as a overarching factor. So let me know what other movies you want me to cover or what other pop culture things you'd like me to touch upon. And of course, as always, just crack a smile, ride the wave, and I'll see you on the next one. Blah!